Hey there, everyone. I'm Lilia Luciana. We're continuing our coverage now that we can confirm that the 5 passengers aboard the Titan expedition mission to the ocean's floor to witness the wreckage of the Titanic have, in fact, been confirmed dead.
It is, in fact, a sad day. I'm Lana Zach. It's good to be with you as we have been following ever since the Coast Guard initially tweeted out that some debris had been found. We now know from the Coast Guard that the debris that they found is consistent with a catastrophic implosion.
The vessel was carrying 5 people. As we've been reporting, it disappeared on Sunday during a dive to the Titanic wreckage. Officials say the initial fragments found include a landing frame, a rear cover from the submersible, among other pieces of this vessel.
In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber.
There at that press conference was Associated Press reporter Michael Casey. He joins us now. Michael, talk to us about what it was like. Did you have any suspicion that this is what they would, or had any confirmation priorly that this is what the Coast Guard would confirm at this press conference? And what else besides what we've been discussing did you learn about when and how and why this happened?
Well, the first part was, we had some inkling because, as we were getting ready for the press conference, the family had issued a statement basically saying that those on board had been lost, and that obviously came after the earlier statement about some debris being found. And so we kind of went into the press conference assuming the worst, I guess, if you will. And in terms of, they confirmed, all they could really say is that they believe that the debris was consistent with an implosion, but there's still a lot of questions to be answered including like when, how, those kind of things they weren't able to answer.
Yeah. Michael, have you been able to learn anything more from your sources about what happens next in terms of putting together this detailed timeline that the Coast Guard referred to, trying to answer some of those questions that you raised?
Well, I mean, it sounds like they're going to be on site for a while. I mean, they made it clear that it was a very difficult, kind of harsh environment, and they didn't say. They didn't say how long it would take, but I think a big part of that is to try to understand, exactly when this implosion happened and what the cause of it was. It sounds. I think we were getting some idea yesterday with reports of, a banging noise that maybe, there was hope of people still being alive. And then, so a lot of the focus was on how much oxygen was left and things like that. But today they kind of put that to rest and said that they don't believe the banging had anything to do with the vessel. So it's most likely it probably happened early in the voyage.
And Michael, can you talk to us about some of the concerns that have been raised prior to this tragedy, prior to this catastrophe and this loss of life, about whether or not this vessel was equipped to handle the kind of pressure, what could have gone wrong, whether the prototypes have been tested enough? Of course, one thing is the tragedy, but moving forward, there's going to be a lot of questions and possible questions about, liability and things like that on this type of expedition.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of a running theme. There was talk of a lawsuit in 2018 regarding an earlier version of this vessel. There was, in some of the reports I've seen, there was questions about some of the equipment that was used on board. And I think we had a story today about one earlier passenger who talked about, called it a kamikaze operation. So, there were definitely concerns, but, the company philosophy seemed to be, people, we need to push the envelope. That we need people want to see the remains of the wreckage of the Titanic, and so we're going to push ahead. And I think what you may see, well, it'll be interesting to see. Does the explorer community use this moment to kind of take stock and kind of reassess whether, going further and deeper and more dangerously at the expense of safety is a good strategy or philosophy? And also, I mean, it was the Coast Guard was asked about that, like regulations, and they didn't really seem to answer it. And I guess that's a hard question to answer because it was out in the middle of the ocean. So are there any real regulations that could prevent these guys from doing what they did, you know?
Right. And to that point about this being really a kind of the wilderness and exploration for the sake of adventure, I want to share this quote that Stockton Rush, the CEO of OceanGate, who was lost in this tragedy, shared with CBS News. He said, quote, "I had this epiphany that I didn't want. It wasn't about going to space. It was about exploring. It was about finding new life forms," discussing his childhood aspirations. He said, "I wanted to be sort of the Captain Kirk. I didn't want to be the passenger in the back. And I realized that the ocean is the universe." He had been multiple times to the Titanic wreck site, and by all accounts, the passengers on board wanted and knew that this was a risky expedition. Whether they knew the full extent of the risks that they were undertaking is still a question. But to your point, Michael, about this community wanting to explore and not really having regulations, are there other companies out there like OceanGate that does this kind of work? Just give us some more context, because I think for a lot of us, we're learning more about this scientific exploration, this adventure exploration that we knew nothing about prior to the Titan going missing.
I mean, I haven't really covered that side of the story too much, but what I can say is that there are a few companies doing this. Like, that was kind of the attraction of OceanGate, is that they were one of the few that was developing this kind of experimental vessel that could go down. I will say, when just watching some of the earlier documentaries, I think even CBS had done, spent some time with him. What I found interesting was just the passion of previous passengers. There was one passenger who I recalled, a banker from New York, who had saved up 30 years just for this moment. And so I think, whatever you want to say about regulations, I think there's always going to be a demand from a certain subset of what they call Titaniacs, who really, this is the top of their bucket list, and really their dream of dreams to go down and see that Titanic wreckage. So I think as long as that passion's there and desire, I think there's always going to be someone trying to fulfill it,
And that very message was echoed, Michael, on the message that OceanGate, the company that carried out this expedition, put out, saying these men were true explorers who shared a distinct spirit of adventure, a deep passion for exploring and protecting the world's oceans. As they shared their condolences, they mentioned, of course, this is an extremely difficult time. And one thing that we continued hearing from the experts that we've been talking to is just how remarkable the efforts were from the U.S. Coast Guard, from the Canadian Coast Guard, from partners who took part of this expedition to find these 5 people, despite this being the worst outcome.
Truly international effort.
A true international effort.
Michael Casey of the Associated Press, thank you for joining us.